All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the next and final installment of the APDA Passport to Research series. Today's topic entitled Trials Tackling Motor Fluctuations. This is also the final installment of the year, as Jen just mentioned. My name is Dave Grosby. I was a longtime sports talk show host here in Seattle. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease back in 2018, and so I'm learning along with everyone else about ways to go about it, about these trials and about exciting new developments as we hope to try and find a cure for this before too long. APDA, has a dual mission of providing help for today for those living with Parkinson's, those like us, and hope for tomorrow by investing in critical research projects. Research is what we're really here to talk about today. Since 1961, APDA has proudly invested the most promising clinicians and scientific projects focused on the discovery of the cause and finding of the cure of Parkinson's disease. They're committed to scientific research and have been a funding partner in many PD scientific breakthroughs. And this Northwest chapter of APDA has proven its commitment to research by raising dollars to fully fund Parkinson's disease registry, which helps speed up the research process by connecting researchers to willing participants. Now keep an eye out on your post-event email for more information about that registry and how to get involved. There is amazing research going on worldwide, including right here in the Pacific Northwest, and we hope through this series you will learn more about the work, the people behind it, and how you can be involved. Before I introduce today's speaker, I want to thank the sponsors of this program, gold sponsor Niagara Bottling and silver sponsor Kiowa Kirin and Athira Pharma. Their support of APDA and the value of educational programs like this is immensely appreciated. Now, during this program, if you have a question for our researcher, please type that question in the Q&A section. We'll get to as many of those as time allows. Today, we are joined by Dr. Jason Aldred. He's a board-certified neurologist, and his neurology residency completed a 2-year clinical research fellowship in Parkinson's disease and movement disorders at the Oregon Health and Science University. He spent many early years out of training, carving out a unique practice and research career. Along with neurology residency and fellowship, he trained in Human Investigators Program at OHSU and has done great work at Selkirk Neurology and Inland North Research. Doctor, thanks for being with us. And in my prep, this line stood out when you said, I'm quoting here, I said I wanted to have an independent practice and research center so I could practice movement disorders and neurology the way I think it is best to do so. Have you been able to accomplish that, and has it had the desired impact you hoped it would?
Well, it's a work in progress, Dave. First of all, I wanted to thank you and having me back again in APDA. But yeah, I think that as a young resident and Parkinson's neurology fellow and coming out of training, I had this envision in my mind of exactly how I thought things could be and all the great things about my training and having more freedom and stuff. But it's a tremendous amount of work, and it's a work in progress. So have I accomplished everything? Not quite yet, but I've certainly learned a lot, and I think that the ability to, for me and my type of interest in practice, really enjoy being in the private practice setting and the private clinical trials setting and research setting. There's pros and cons to doing things different ways, but have a fabulous team, and really I still get motivated every day by my patients and the things that the needs that we cannot meet. And that's really why I went in and have stayed in research, is not because of the things we can do well, but because of the things that we can't do well. And my mentor, Jay Nutt at OHSU, always said that, the best research questions come out of the problems you have in clinic. And we still have lots of them. So we're on the process of accomplishing, more and more.
We've asked everyone involved in this so far. How did you originally get involved in this line of work?
Well, always very interested in neurology and movement disorders and degenerative diseases, and was interested in either Alzheimer's or Parkinson's type stuff. And I really felt that the movement disorders were very fascinating. And I liked that there were a lot of breakthroughs already, and we had some pathways to treat some of these conditions, and always been fascinated by the chemistry behind treating Parkinson's with Levodopa, how miraculous that can be. And of course, the amazing technology behind deep brain stimulation and the dramatic improvements that people can get with that. But seeing that active interest in it, my area of training, was a fantastic way to learn. And then being out here in Spokane, Washington, where we're at now, there's just a tremendous need. So I wanted to take what I learned and be in a place where I thought there was a real need and a real, perhaps a shortage of sorts for opportunities otherwise to participate in research and to get Parkinson's care. So that's why I'm here in Spokane, serving the Inland Northwest with our team.
Have there been, it sounds like there have been some advancements in the field, many advancements, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, absolutely. When I started Parkinson's fellowship, I finished my residency in 2007 and started fellowship then. At that point, it was Levodopa, and we had a few dopamine agonists that were safer than the prior versions of dopamine agonists, and deep brain stimulation was the new thing. It had been around for a little while, but we were finally starting to really get good at using it, and that's where I started. Since then, fast forward, 15 years or so, we've gotten pretty good at using DBS. We've gone from kind of the sedan DBS to the Ferrari, I like to say. And you pick what DBS you want this time? It's like picking between a Ferrari, Lamborghini, or some other fancy device that has way more technology than we could even use at any given visit. So that's really exciting. That's been a big advancement. As continued improvements, I like to say Levodopa is the wheel, and so they invented the wheel with Levodopa. Was a big deal treating Parkinson's, and you didn't think you could make any improvements on the wheel, but we continue to see more and more incremental benefits in how we're delivering Levodopa, making it more reliable, better tolerated for patients. And then also looking outside of the dopamine area, focusing only on dopamine type therapies for movement symptoms has been the thing, from when I came on until in the field until very recently. And lately, looking at medications that work outside of the dopamine system. We'll be talking about some of those today, and other ways to improve Parkinson's symptoms, not relying on the same pathway, gives us, I think, more breadth on ways to focus on Parkinson's symptoms and tolerability of medicine.
How about talking about the impact of motor fluctuations in PD and how it's currently tackled?
Right. Currently, motor fluctuations in Parkinson's disease are still managed by replacing dopamine with carbidopa, levodopa, adding medicines on that help a person's own and their own inner dopamine levels work better or have a higher level. And look-alike medications to levodopa, the dopamine agonist, and then trying to use the levodopa in an intelligent way, the right dose, the right frequency to improve the symptoms, not too much so you have very bothersome dyskinesia, and not too little so that you're wearing off, the continued balancing act. I mean, we're still with that. That still is, for better or for worse, that still is the standard of care. And the newer medicines look to take those fundamentals and improve on that strategy. But there are some very important drug delivery methods that have been developed in the last few years. The carbidopa levodopa gel, the intestinal infusion duopa has been very fundamental to improve symptoms for a variety of patients, some who may not even have been candidates for other therapies like DBS in the past. So opening a doorway for treatment for people that maybe weren't able to benefit from deep brain stimulation due to cognitive impairment or other risks. And the other thing, of course, is knowing that people can continue those therapies long term. With the duopa, there's a PEG J tube, so there's a stomach tube basically, which is not always desirable for a number of reasons that are obvious for many patients. And so trying to take that again, going to the next level, so trying to further refine delivery methods that aren't the same old taking pills throughout the day is the name of the game, and where we're headed still with motor fluctuations.
What can you give us an example of some of the stuff you're working on right now?
Absolutely, yeah. So let me go ahead and I've put together some slides for folks to look at. That way, they don't necessarily have to watch it later and rewind and re-listen. Hopefully, it can kind of be helpful. So I'm just going to put those up, Dave. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
All right, fantastic. Are you all able to see my slides at this point?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Well, I was going to talk about a couple of trials here, and with some slides to prompt, looking at, and this should be IPX 203. I think hopefully it's corrected later. The first trial I'm going to talk about is for a product called ABBV 951. And I will let you guys know, because of confidentiality and disclosure things with these companies developing these products. Everything here is taken more or less from press releases, which is the best way to kind of do public review before things are formally approved and released to the public. So we are under a little bit of have to be mindful and respectful of those boundaries. But we can talk about lots of public information on here that I'm happy to take us through that we're working on. And these are all trials we're working at in our centers and many other Pacific Northwest centers as well, I believe. So the ABV 951, this is subcutaneous carbidopa, levodopa. It's a pump. So there already is a Carbidope levodopa pump that's out. That's called the Duopa pump. We were just talking about it. It's put in through a stomach tube into the stomach and its small intestine, and it delivers levodopa continuously. Of course, having a semi-permanent tube and the abdominal wall is not always desirable. There are some downsides to that, although it's tremendously beneficial. This ABB V951 is a subcutaneous. So it's like, think of it, it's not the same thing, but it's akin to a subcutaneous diabetic pump. Now, when I say subcutaneous, what I mean, what you might think of is the skin, the area underneath the skin. There's a very small plastic cannula, which is a very small, thin, flexible tube implanted anywhere between, 1 to 3 days at a time. Run it around the clock. And we've got some trial data. I was actually asked to present the first public release of trial data at the American Academy of Neurology in Seattle this past April, where we reviewed an analysis of a year-long study for open label trial for people on ABV 951, which was positive. And then we have forthcoming some information on a randomized clinical trial for this subcutaneous carbidopa levodopa treatment. That's very exciting. Encourage everyone to look for. And this is disregard that at the bottom is from an old slide, the reference on cannabis. I kind of reformatted my slides here from other stuff. The ABV 951, there's AbbVie submitted a new drug application to the FDA on May 20th of this year. The submission is based on results from the phase 3 study I was referencing, showing statistically significant improvement in on time without troublesome dyskinesia compared to oral immediate release levodopa. So that's a big deal when these companies go to the FDA. They feel that there has been enough information from the clinical trial meeting the outcomes, safety, and benefit of for the medication to be used in the condition. So ultimately, the FDA will have the final determination and independent review with their experts. But I was very fortunate to be involved with this trial for a number of years. And you can see from the release information that it was, there's a lot of positive stuff behind this, and we'll see how it goes. The Biobee, this is a different kind of concept. Biobee is a company that's looking at inflammatory, anti-inflammatory type treatments for a variety of neurodegenerative disorders. We've known for a long time that the degenerative process we see in Parkinson's disease, which involves alpha-synuclein, that is a chemical inside of neurons and the areas affected by Parkinson's. This alpha-synuclein is a very fundamental chemical, and it misfolds and clogs up the whole system. The exact aspect of how that's done and how we can fix it still to be worked out. But a secondary part of that is after there's an injury to a system, any system in the body, typically, there's an inflammatory response that can occur. So there's concern that the inflammatory response, second, not necessarily even related to the problem with alpha-synuclein and perhaps the primary cause of Parkinson's disease, this inflammatory response makes the metabolism of the cells just go haywire, and it could accelerate progression. Theories include, why do certain people progress faster than others? One of the ideas that's been volunteered is it could be the inflammatory response. It might be different, in different people. I mean, some people get sick from COVID different than others, and that's kind of an inflammatory thing. So that's kind of the idea that we're working with here. And this compound that they're looking at, NE3107, is a small molecule blood-brain permeable compound with anti-inflammatory, insulin sensitizing, and they call it ERK binding properties. This is part of the inflammatory pathway. And this is just some idea about the chemistry here. And the point, and the reason I put this on here, of course, is part of the release, but for most people that are living with Parkinson's following research, you should look at that and say, well, what? I've never seen that before. Well, that's kind of the point. It's a novel or a new type of system that's being looked at. And interestingly, one of the interesting kind of parts of this is they haven't seen significant safety signals in the non-clinical and early clinical studies. I just read a study on kind of the preclinical work on this, and it was kind of interesting that they weren't finding, more side effects than you would normally express these medicines to very high doses. You'll see something, but for reasons that aren't yet clear, that good in a good way, the tolerability seems good so far. But of course, we're just in the very beginnings of this exploration with this NE3107. That's their code name for it before it gets this proper name, if it's approved down the road. And again, I mentioned here that they're looking at a variety of disorders: Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, frontotemporal dementia, ALS, because these conditions do have, are thought to have important inflammatory aspects independent of the primary disease process. So looking for things that cross across different types of degenerative disorders. So I think that's a pretty interesting concept. And again, the idea here is, if you look on clinicaltrials.gov, I don't have specifics about this because it was pretty early on, but this is to talk about motor fluctuations, but they're actually in the phase 2 trial are actually looking to see if there is in fact motor improvement. So looking potentially even for symptomatic benefit. That's kind of what we're talking about here today. So you look at this and think, well, maybe this is disease modifying, and that of course may be explored later. But at this point, looking to see if there may be actually symptomatic benefit from blunting the inflammatory response.
Is it a new idea, not to interrupt you, is it a new idea to actually be exploring possible Parkinson's solutions with looking at dementia and other things like that? Is that a fairly new development in research?
You mean looking at treating dementia in Parkinson's, or looking at
looking at treating something that may impact all three of them, in other words?
Yeah, well, they're certainly, you got Jen and you all were talking about the Holy Grail, et cetera, early with disease modification and disease modifying therapies, and there is. There's always some common pathway that different degenerative disorders may share. They may overlap in certain ways with common pathways, but how important that pathway is that links, for example, Alzheimer's disease has dementia, Parkinson's disease. If you live long enough, you'll get dementia, and early on can have some cognitive impairment. And these other conditions, it's very different based on the condition. I mean, Alzheimer's disease is a disorder of cognition. It's a disorder of dementia. Parkinson's disease absolutely affects cognition early to a bit, but early on, predominantly, it's more of a movement problem. So it just depends. I think it's more of a timing thing. And the idea is that first, they're for reasons that we won't go into, they're looking at symptom improvement. But yes, I think that regardless of whether it's Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, I mean, if there is a inflammatory part of these conditions, if they're started early enough, it could prevent some of that crossover where these conditions start to, more people that have dementia with advanced Parkinson's, and you see it more similarities crossing across other disorders. But I think it has a lot to do with the timing, and I think we're pretty far away from knowing how these might be involved with that right now.
Right. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So again, just some other kind of pearls about this, just looking at some of the preclinicals, this has been tested. It shows improvement in inflammation and insulin sensitivity, which has some role that we do know a little bit about in Parkinson's disease pathology, but it's not perfectly understood. One important thing that was looked at is they actually did some early preclinical, but the preclinical means animal studies, with levodopa, and either given it alone with or without this medication, and the combination improved motor control when this NE3107 was given with levodopa than either drug alone. So there was some kind of synergistic or beneficial effect of these two together. again, it is showing that probably levodopa, certainly we know levodopa helps movement, but it may help movement, but have some inherent limitations due to inflammation that could be part of the disease. And perhaps if inflammation dialed down, then this other compound was given it, perhaps it, the theory is it might have some better response. So kind of the interesting part again is that this is a compound that's in a potential, this is experimental therapy that's being looked at that doesn't involve dopamine. So that's really pretty favorable. So this is the study that we're involved in here, this phase 2 double-blind placebo-controlled trial looking at 40 patients with, and then the off-state randomizing them for 28 days, pretty short study. So, if someone are interested, we're one of 14 sites in North America working on this project. So hopefully we'll see some favorable safety and benefit and see this go along to the next phase. This is a treatment, or this is an experimental therapy that's being investigated. I've been working with this project now for 7 years. Wow. So it's been a long time. This is IPX203. It was initially first brought up by Impact, hence the IPX. And since then, a company called Amneal has purchased that company and has taken over the trial. The phase 3 trial is RISE PD, looking at people with Parkinson's with motor fluctuations. And Bob Hauser presented, he's down at South Florida. He's a Parkinson's professor down there, presented at the meeting in Seattle as well. The phase 3 data here, which was very exciting, showing that there was improvement demonstrating IPX203 compared to immediate release levodopa. So basically what they did is they found that when they dosed this new study drug IPX203, an average 3 times per day, and carbidopa, levodopa, oral immediate release 5 times a day, the people got better on both, and they were actually slightly more on time in the IPX203 group, which was really very encouraging. So that's something that they're filing for approval for that, and the FDA is going to go through a review process at some point, and again, further making the wheel better. Who could reinvent the wheel? Well, they're trying to make it, levodopa better and better. So I think the idea is if you're having wearing off of your medicine, well, many people with Parkinson's know that you can take the dose more often. That helps, but of course, there's inherent problems in dosing the medicine more frequently. Some people are very good with compliance, others are not. Sometimes things come up that food can interact with levodopa more. So having something shown compared along with oral carbidopa, levodopa, and you take it less often and you do as well and perhaps slightly better than taking it 5 times a day, and that's pretty encouraging. That's good. That's definitely the direction we want to be headed. And many people they're reasonably pleased with their oral Parkinson's meds. They may not want to jump to more advanced invasive therapy. So expanding the option for oral medicines to work well with wearing off of meds is still a major priority. And again, I'm really excited. I have fingers crossed. Hopefully, the independent review goes well with this, and maybe we'll find something favorable to hear more about this in the future. So closed enrollment, but I've worked with this project for a long time, so really hope to hear that this enters the mainstream at some point. Mesdopetam. This is another compound. This is a dopamine agonist, and dopamine agonists are, again, we mentioned them a bit earlier. They're medicines that mimic the effect of levodopa. They're not as strong as levodopa, but they last a lot longer. There's 3 of them approved on the market. They're the second. There was older ones that were on the market that had some safety issues, and so the newer ones were developed, and we use them all the time. Requit, Mirapex, the new Pro Patch. And there's pros and cons to those. However, if this was simply another dopamine agonist or a non-levodopa kind of dopamine therapy, I don't know that I would be very excited about it. But this is different. This is a dopamine agonist therapy that has shown in animals to have anti-dyskinesia, meaning it reduces dyskinesia, and some antipsychotic properties. And that's completely unique. That's the opposite of what you would expect for dopamine agonist, if you give any of those drugs I mentioned with levodopa and you have dyskinesia, it drives dyskinesia. So it's interesting, you know, I was reading the paper on this in the animal studies a while ago, and what they did is they went and they took a dopamine agonist and they adjusted it to make it a dopamine. It's the same size and has the same properties as dopamine agonist, but it works like a dopamine blocker. It gets a little fuzzy. The bottom line is they've engineered this quite a lot to give it some unique properties to reduce dyskinesia and potentially confusional states, which are a big problem, you know, with Parkinson's. And so this study that's going on now, which we're enrolling on actively, is looking at the safety and benefit of this added on to levodopa, looking at on time. How do you get better on time without troublesome dyskinesia in people with Parkinson's, which, you know, again, extends the ability of someone to take their oral meds. It's a fairly short trial. We kind of talked about this. This is not an investigational therapy, but this is something that I thought our audience might really like to hear about. It's a Parkinson's Kinetograph. It's not being investigated any further, but this is basically a wristwatch that measures your Parkinson's. It's clinically released in 2021 by a company, Global Kinetics, and it's starting to take off for use. Wear it on your wrist, the most affected side. And it measures tremor, movement, it has a dose reminder, and you swipe it, it tells you, it tells the doctor how you respond to your medicine. We've used this, I've used this in our projects we work on. The sponsors, many of them have used this for years. But it was for research only. You know, you've heard that. Oh, I've read about that. It's for research only. And this is a situation where it's was for research and now it's made its way into the clinic. It's covered under remote patient monitoring services for Medicare. For a couple months now, we've just started doing this, and it's been interesting. You know, people come in and they say, "Well, I'm not really sure how my medicine's working. It works sometimes, not the others." You know, they like most people, keeping a very detailed diaries can be kind of hard, and they can't always keep track of tremor and slowness and med compliance. And so this kind of wraps all that together. And now I can send patients home with send them this watch in the mail, basically, and it's all set up and very smooth operations. They wear it, and every week I get data on how they're responding to their meds. You know, which is, I mean, you know, there's something to be said about new drugs, et cetera. But I think, again, the idea of returning to fundamentals is huge. We know, you know, one of the things APDA does great is they get the fundamentals down, take your medicine on time. You know, all these things are super important. You can have the fanciest medicines around, but if you're not using them appropriately, you know, you're missing an opportunity. So the idea here is this device will be useful and provide an objective way to tell me and for me to tell my patients how they're responding to their meds. And I think that it's actually very worth mentioning and being aware of. And these are the kind of things also that we do seeing in many clinical trials, either this device or other devices like it. So I think it's still relevant for motor fluctuation trials. If anyone ends up participating in or has participated in clinical trials, then they probably are, you know, they're going to see or be accustomed to something like this. So the last two things to discuss, we still are okay on time?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I've got two things about deep brain stimulation. The first one's from Boston Scientific, and the second is from Medtronic, regarding ways that we hope to use deep brain stimulation better than we currently are for motor fluctuations in Parkinson's disease. So we're actually one of the top enrollers and been very active in this particular project for Boston Scientific, the Guide XT. Normally, if you have deep brain stimulation, you're brought in off your medicine and the brain's programmed, and we follow how they look and how they move and walk, which, you know, makes total sense. The different settings, monitor for side effects. That's great. It takes a long time to do that. For some people, it can be very easy. For others, it can be very complicated. And you know, time is a premium thing in clinic. limits a lot of what we're able to do. And some patients come from a long ways away, and you don't have a lot of opportunity. So this and the next thing with Medtronic I'm going to talk about really focuses on making the programming sessions better, higher yield, fewer side effects. The Guide XT is visual. So what we're able to do, it takes the patient's actual brain anatomy, and there's mathematical equations how the deep brain stimulation field is modeled, and it shows you more or less, it's like looking at a coloring book that's been color coded for, okay, this is the spot you want to be, and we set it up looking at the actual pictures of the patient's anatomy instead of looking at the patient. Now, obviously, we look at the patient too, but the idea is to program the DBS with the anatomy visually, and then it should follow that if the right area is being targeted, the symptoms are going to improve, and that is dramatically faster than we would be able to do if we were simply following symptoms and going through every setting. And patients out there who have deep brain stimulation have already had it done, know exactly what I'm talking about. There are different programmers that have different proficiency levels and speeds with which they can do this. So just a couple other quick things here. The implantation of the device is the same. The device itself is the same. The change is the software that we're using to analyze images captured of the brain and the locations where the stimulator is placed, and the mathematical equations used to model the stimulation field of the electrical current that changes the electrical firing pattern of the brain that helps Parkinson's symptoms. So hopefully, again, we hope to see that multiple visits and hours of trial and error trying to get the right settings are replaced by a quick, direct approach to to programming the exact anatomy, and gets you as a patient where you need to be faster, quicker, with fewer problems than ever before. We have we have presented at some conferences, neurosurgery and neurology conferences, some preliminary findings, looking at the overall programming time with this XT guide system was significantly shorter than traditional programming time, and beneficial for the physicians and patients, and it eliminated the need for additional appointments. I mean, we've got a very large DBS program here in Spokane, extremely large, and have for quite a while. And we have patients come from, 7 hours away, Great Falls and Northeast Oregon, Central Washington, North Idaho. And so, yeah, this is a real problem, getting these visits to tune things up. Many people, it's not a big deal, but if you have to kind of use some extra tools to get it dialed in just right, the idea is programming the actual anatomy should be really helpful, make it less complex. And also it should, in theory, we hope that this type of technology will allow those with, not necessarily spending all their time doing Parkinson's, but maybe they're doing other aspects of neurology, and patients are in other areas where they don't have subspecialists, but can make it, easier for people with less time spent with Parkinson's disease to do a really great job.
Good stuff. Good stuff. We got one question that a couple people have asked, and it's not surprisingly, it's about that watch. Is that something that's available through a neurologist, available to buy?
Yeah. The watch is available. You don't really want to go out and buy it because your doctor needs to. The watch is a tool, like the physical examination is a tool, and it's only as so good as your doctor's understanding of your particular condition, your meds, and overall their plan for what they're doing for you. So it's very important, this goes through your doctor. But what you want to do is, I'll put my colleagues a little bit on the spot. You can go ahead and grill them a little bit and say, hey, maybe see if you can get me set up with one of these PKG watches if you're having problems with your meds. This isn't for people that are doing fine, that are engineers that just want to know and get data. I encourage you to do some other things. But if you're really this is really for people who have had some good responses to their meds, but man, their doctor, if your neurologist is working really hard, you and your doctor are working really hard trying to figure out why your meds are so hard to use, this is exactly what it's for. So that it should really be done through the neurology office, the movement disorders office. And I mean, my feeling, it was a little challenging to get to figure out at first. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's one more thing that I got to do in addition to everything else. But it's something that you actually do in between visits. And for example, I just read a patient's PKG today for an upcoming visit next week. And they're having a couple issues. And so we did one right after the visit, and they're doing one for a couple weeks before the next visit. And I'm going to go into that visit now with some very recent information on how their medicine is working. And it doesn't replace talking to the person and getting, doing a history and exam, and it doesn't replace anything, but hopefully it will help me make medical decisions quicker, faster, with fewer side effects, better benefits. So that's really what it's for. So don't worry about going on your own and trying to find it on your own. It's not going to really be useful that way. But have the conversation with your treating provider and ask them about it, and give them a little chance to get used to it, because it's a new technology that we're getting in the clinic here. It takes a little time to iron out.
Final question for you, Doctor. How can people get in touch with you and get involved in some of your trials? Yeah,
absolutely. So we have here, well, let me see, it kind of disappeared. We have a pretty big clinic and research program out here in Spokane. Let's see here if we have it's going to be info at inlandnorthwestresearch.com is the best way to get in touch with us. You have a website, phone number as well, all those things. But yeah, happy to do that. And we work, I mean, I have patients that go for clinical trials, and with my colleagues in Portland, Seattle, and they, so if they have a trial that fits over there, they'll do that. And if, trial fits over here for you, the travel is very easy to handle. I have a slide on this or not, but basically, for many of these trials, transportation, airfare, hotel, all that's covered, in addition to a small stipend for your trouble of your time. So yeah, I mean, we love to have patients interested, and kind of do some review over the phone, pre-screening, as to see if you would fit one of these trials. So everything, if you really want, another thing I'd recommend is our website has all this information on there. Also, clinicaltrials.gov is a government website where all clinical trials have to be registered, and there's a very straightforward, it's pretty basic, but very straightforward information, and it has contact information, not just for for us, but all research centers for a particular trial. So you go to clinicaltrials.gov, put in Parkinson's disease, and a bunch of stuff pops up, and we'll be on there for some of these trials as well.
Dr. Aldred, thank you very much for your time today and all that great information for us. Really appreciate it.
Excellent. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Jason Aldred, and that was great info. It's our last session of APDA Passport to Research series. We want to thank all the doctors and research specialists for being a part of this year's series. Now, Jen will be sending out a post-program email. It'll give you more information about the trials we just talked about, as well as give you a link to the APDA Northwest YouTube channel, which is where you'll be able to find a recording of this program and the other 3 programs we conducted. For everyone involved in the series, thank you so much. I hope we've brought some good information your way that you can use as your journey with Parkinson's continues. And stay tuned to APDA Northwest for all the new stuff and all the new developments that are coming our way. Thank you again, everyone.